Hello, everybody. This is Saswati, today's host for Storytime at 9, and I welcome you to a show that brings you the finest storytellers from far and wide. Every Saturday at 9, we soak ourselves. Interesting stories, engaging from the storyteller's country. We learn more about their culture, their food, their heritage, and we enjoy ourselves. Today we are traveling. Ooh, fasten your seatbelts, and we're traveling to the lion city of Singapore. Did I just say Singapore? And if I said yes, it's Singapore, then we have with us none other than the godmother of storytelling, Madam SHEILA WEE, a passionate, acclaimed, a storyteller, a mentor for many, a guiding light for the storytelling fraternity. And storytellers like me adore, love, and admire her from the deepest core of our heart. A lovable person she is, and soon we're going to plunge into her stories. So let's get wait. Just like every other Saturday, let's listen to the lovely stories. And stories are meant to be shared. So don't keep them to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe while you're listening to the amazing stories. And at the end, we have a session wherein we can ask our questions to our lovely guest, Ella of our day. But before we plunge or get started, the Valentine's week is right at the corner. Valentine's week, and a day where we can gift our loved ones not a single rose, but a rose plant. When I say loved ones, I mean your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins, and not to forget your parents. Yes, this is it. Give a rose, rose, rose. So gift a plant that grows, that breathes, and lives with you. So without further ado, we have with us our guest, storyteller, Madam SHEILA WEE.
Thank you for that lovely warm welcome. Oh, that was really, really nice. Okay, I'm going to be telling you all about Singapore and telling you some Singapore stories. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation, so let me see if I can get that up. Okay, share screen. Oh. Application, there we go. I've got it from the beginning. And I just wanted to share with you a map first, because although India is not that far away from Singapore, you might be forgiven for missing where Singapore is, because Singapore is very small. It's very, very small compared to the big country of India. And if you look on the map here, you'll see up north there's Thailand and Cambodia, and Thailand goes right down into Malaysia, and right at the bottom of Malaysia, there's a tiny little red dot, and that is Singapore. In fact, we've been called the little red dot. I don't know why it shows a little green dot. Well, maybe that's because Singapore actually is a very green country. Although we're very small, we have lots and lots of trees. But I'll tell you about that a little bit later on. And this is what Singapore looks like when you look out, down on it from the sky. It's a very funny sort of shape. Up at the top there, that's Malaysia. And down the bottom right there, that is the Riau Islands of Indonesia. So we are very surrounded by Malaysia and Indonesia, a tiny little island. And you see that cross in the middle? That's where I live, almost in the middle of Singapore, a place called Bradel. And the wonderful thing about Singapore, although it is a city-state, and it's very much a city, there are lots and lots of tall buildings, you can see in the middle, there are lots of green places. And that's our what we call our central catchment area, where we get all our water. You can see the reservoirs and the lakes there. So there still are some very green places in this little tiny city of ours. So I was asked to share some pictures of my family. So this is my family. And in the middle there is my younger daughter, Sophie, and my dog, Paddy, who is a poodle. And he wanted to come in just now, but I thought I'd better not because he might start barking. And up there, that's the whole family, myself, my husband, Sophie in the cap, my elder daughter, Julie, and my grandson, Jamie. And that picture was taken just yesterday because we were very lucky to go on a staycation, which is like a holiday without going anywhere. So we went to stay on in a hotel on an island of Singapore, a holiday island called Sentosa. So just for 2 nights. So that was really nice. And there's me playing with my grandson. And that's our cat. That's Pickles. And down the bottom there, you can see my son-in-law, Fabian, and my daughter, Julie. And you'll see he's in army uniform. That's because all the men in Singapore who are under, I think, about the age of 40, have to do reservists. So he's actually a major in the armed forces, but he only goes into the armed forces about, 3 or 4 weeks out of the year. But he likes it. That's his playtime. He gets to go and play in the jungle. So that's my family. And now I think I should tell you some Singapore stories, no? Let's stop sharing for a while so that I can at least see a couple of human. Okay, so I thought I would share 2 stories with you that come from a book that was written in probably, they're not exactly sure, maybe the 15th or the 16th century. So a few hundred years ago. And this book is called the Sejarah Melayu, the Malay Annals. And it was written to show that the kings, the Malay kings, that is from Malaysia and Singapore, when Malaysia and Singapore were all one, to show how important they were and to show that they were the right people to rule the country. And I thought I'd share these stories in particular because these are the stories that have very strong links to India. Now, the first story I'm going to tell you starts with an Indian king. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of him. They're not exactly sure who he was. Sometimes people call him Raja Cholan, sometimes Raja Suran, sometimes Raja Chola. But in the version that I tell, he's called Raja Suran. And it was said that he ruled over much of India. I think possibly where Tamil Nadu is now, but I'm not sure. Nobody's completely sure. But they say he was a great king. But he wanted to be even greater. He wanted to be like his great, 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 great grandfather, whose name, funnily enough, was Alexander the Great. I don't know if any of you have heard of Alexander the Great. Have you? Well, I learned about him in school. And all I can remember was that he died very young. He loved his horse. And he conquered half the world. And it was this last thing that Raja Suran wanted to copy. He made all the princes of the nearby kingdoms bow down to him and pay him taxes. But there was one person who refused to bow down, one person who refused to pay taxes, and that was the Emperor of China. And this made Raja Suran so angry that he said, I am going to invade China. And he gathered a huge army from every part of his empire. Why, the army was so big, it was impossible to count the number of soldiers, impossible to count the number of horses and elephants, impossible to count the number of weapons. But although he had this huge army, he also had a little problem. You see, he wasn't exactly sure where China was. They didn't have maps like we have today. They didn't have GPS. Now, he thought that China must be in the south. And so they say that he went north. I don't understand that. But they say he went north and he got over the mountain somehow into Myanmar. How he did it, I don't know. What, with all those horses and elephants? Do you think they could have done it? That's what the book says. That's what the legend says. And this huge army was in what is now Myanmar. And they started to march south because that's where he thought China was. They marched for week after week, month after month, always keeping the sea in sight. You know, people said that wherever that army passed, the forests were flattened. They said the lakes dried up, so many men drank from them. They said it took 6 months for that army to pass by a single village. Down through Myanmar they went and into Thailand. And there they fought a great battle with the king of Thailand's army and emerged victorious. And then further south into what is now Malaysia, month after month after month of marching, until at last they stood on the shores of the Straits of Johor, looking over the water to Singapore. But in those days, it wasn't known as Singapore. It was known as Temasek, which basically just means fishing village. There weren't many people there. Raja Suran ordered his men to build rafts so to ferry them across the narrow straits. And after a time, they managed it. They were on the north shore of Temasek. And Raja Suran, he gave the order, march south. But if any of you have been to Singapore, or even seen Singapore on a map, you'll know it's very small. And so it didn't take them very long at all before they could see the sea again. And Raja Suran realized that if he wanted to get to China, he would have to travel by ship. And so he set his men to building strong ships. But he also sent men off in every direction, said, find the way to China and find it quick. Now, Raja Suran's army, his plan to invade China, wasn't a secret. You couldn't really keep such a huge army a secret. And traders who sailed the coasts, they heard about it. And as people like to do, they told their friends. And their friends told their friends, and their friends told their friends, and their friends told their friends, until eventually someone told the Emperor of China himself. When he heard this news, the Emperor was very worried. He knew he didn't have an army big enough to defeat the mighty army of Rajasuran. What was he to do? He called all his most trusted advisors, his ministers together, and he said, look, you must find a way to stop Rajasuran's army reaching China. And so the ministers, the advisors, they sat down and they thought. They thought all day. They thought all night. All day, all night, all day, all night. And they couldn't come up with a good idea until, just as the sun was rising, the chief minister jumped up. I know, I've got an idea. And he rushed out of the room, ran down the corridors to the emperor's rooms. And he told the emperor his idea. The emperor smiled for the first time in days. That might just work. Go and get what you need at once. And so the chief minister went down to the harbor to find a ship to sail to Temasek, to sail to Singapore. But he didn't look for the best ship, the fastest ship, the newest ship. No. He searched the harbor until he found the oldest ship there. Its planks were worn and its sails were yellow with age. The other ministers had followed him down to the harbor, and they were very puzzled by this. How was that old ship going to save them from Rajasuran's mighty army? They were even more puzzled by what the chief minister did next. For next he went out into the city to find sailors to crew the ship. And he chose the oldest ones he could find. Why? Some of them were so old they could hardly walk. They had to be carried on board the ship. An old ship with old sailors. What was the chief minister doing? Well, next, he did something that seemed even more ridiculous. He ordered that great big old fruit trees be dug up out of the palace orchards, planted into big pots, and carried onto the deck of the ship. An old ship with old sailors and old fruit trees. By now, half the city was talking. Oh, I think the chief minister has lost his mind. Next, the chief minister ordered that every single sewing needle in the city be brought to the palace. By the next morning, the palace courtyard was filled with great big piles of sewing needles. Pick out all the old and rusty needles, said the chief minister to the servants. The palace servants worked hard all day. And by night time, they had picked out all the old and rusty needles and put them into sacks, 50 sacks full. One of the servants went up to the chief minister. Sir, we have packed the rusty needles into sacks. We have 50 sacks of them. Shall we throw them away? No, don't throw them away. Put them on board the ship. So now there was an old ship with old sailors, old fruit trees, and old rusty needles. The whole city was talking. The chief minister had lost his mind. But the chief minister didn't say anything. He and the emperor stood in the harbor and waved the ship off on its voyage to Temasek, its voyage to Singapore. And many weeks later, that strange old ship arrived in Temasek harbor. Rajasuran and his men were still there. They still hadn't worked out the way to China. And when the lookouts saw this strange old ship with great big fruit trees growing on its deck and a crew of old grandfathers. They just fell about laughing. Everyone on the island came to look, even Raja Suran himself. What country is it that has such old sailors? He asked. The oldest of the sailors spoke up. Sire, we were not always so old. When we started our voyage, we were all strong young men, and we were carrying a cargo of fruit tree seeds and great iron bars. But it has taken us so long to get here from China that we have grown old. The seeds have grown into trees, and the iron bars have rusted down to the size of needles. And he threw open a sack of needles to show Raja Suran. As Raja Suran gazed down at the rusty needles, he sighed. If China was so far away, he would be an old man before he got there. His soldiers would be old too old to fight. No, it was not worth it. He would go and find some other nearer land to conquer. And so he gave the order and turned that army back the way they came, to India. And China was saved. But that's not the end of the story. For they say that Raja Suran himself did not go back to India. They say that he stayed in Temasek in Singapore. And every night he had the same dream. A dream of an undersea kingdom. And at last he had to go. And he descended below the sea into the undersea kingdom of Dika. And there he met the great Sea King himself. And as happens in such stories, the Sea King had a beautiful daughter. And as happens in such stories, of course, Raja Suran fell in love with the Sea Princess. And as happens usually, they got married. And they lived very happily together in the kingdom below the sea. They had 3 fine sons together. But then Raja Suran began to miss his old life. I think he began to miss India. And he grew very sad. And his wife said, you must go back. Go back to your own land. Go back to your own people. Now Raja Suran wanted to take his wife and his sons with him. But the Sea King said, no, my daughter and my grandsons will stay here. But, Raja Suran, I make you a promise that when your sons grow into men, they will come up out of the sea and become kings on the land. And some people say that is what happened. The 3 princes emerged from the sea at a place called Palembang in Sumatra, Indonesia. And they did become kings. The youngest prince became the king of Palembang, and his brothers became kings of neighboring kingdoms. Now in time, the youngest prince got married and had a son of his own. Now, if you came from Singapore, you would know that son's name. His name was Sang Nila Utama. The very same Sang Nila Utama who sailed across stormy waters, saw what he thought was a lion, and gave our country its name, Singapura, Lion City. But that That, as they say, that's another story. So that is a story from the Malay annals. And although India didn't get the best of the trick, it shows, to me, it shows the huge influence that Singapore has had on Southeast Asia. And maybe Rajasurin didn't come down the way it says in the story, but definitely the Indian influence has come down. Why the very name of Singapore is Sanskrit. Singa, lion, Pura, city. So we have a very long connection with India. And my next story comes maybe a bit later than that, also from the Malay annals. But this is a story. Well, I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to say what it's about. But it's got an Indian connection as well. There was once a young man. He worked hard all day in the fields underneath the hot Indonesian sun. He worked hard for no money, not a single coin, for he was a slave. He got some food, but not enough. Never enough. He'd been taken when he was just a young boy, taken from his mother and his father, his family, his village, taken to Sumatra, Indonesia, and made to work in the fields. He worked hard, but he didn't have enough food. And so he always felt sick. He always felt weak. But he was a clever young man. And one day he thought, I should get myself more food. How can I get more food? And then he remembered when he was a young boy, watching his father, watching his uncles weave bamboo into fishing traps to catch fish in the river. If I could catch fish, I could get strong again. And so he tried. He cut bamboo and he wove it. It took him many weeks before he could make a proper trap. But at last he had it. And he went and he put it in the river. Well, he waited all day. Ooh, I wonder if I'm going to catch any fish. That evening, he went to the river. He took the trap out and there were 2 silver fish in there. Oh, he was so happy. He took them back and he cooked them. And that night, his stomach was full. And after that, every day he had 1 or 2 sometimes. Once he even had 3 fish in his trap. And he grew stronger, much stronger. But one day when he went to check the trap, there weren't any fish in it. He didn't think anything of it. And he went back the next day. Still no fish. But he noticed that there were fish bones on the riverbank. Huh? And the same happened the next day and the next. No fish in the trap, but fish bones on the riverbank. Someone was stealing his fish. And this made this young man, whose name was Badang. Can you say that? Badang. This made Badang very, very angry. And he said, I'm going to catch that thief. And he climbed up into a tree that had a branch that stretched out over the river. And he sat in the tree. I'm going to sit in this tree all night if I have to. I'm going to catch that thief. And so he sat and he waited and he watched. He waited for a long time and nothing happened. But then, deep in the night, he heard a sound, a splashing sound. Something was coming towards him, up the river, closer and closer. And then he saw it in the moonlight. It was a hantu ayah, a water spirit, half man, half fish, with scales for skin and a long green beard. It came under the tree. It reached into the fish trap and it pulled out the fish and it started to eat. Badang sat in the tree and his anger rose. He didn't think. He leapt off of the tree. He caught hold of the hantu ayah's beard and he pulled it out of the water. He pulled and he pulled and he shook him around. And the moment the hantu ayah was out of the water, it lost all of its strength. Let me go, let me go. Let me back in the water. I need the water. You stole my fish. I'll give you anything you want. I will make you rich. I will give you the power to become invisible. I will make you very strong. Tell me what you want. Oh, he can give wishes, thought Badang. Okay, what should I ask for? Money? Oh, but if I have money, my master will take it away from me. He said the power to be invisible. Oh, that would be interesting. But I think I'd get into trouble. No, strength, that's what I want. Give me strength, give me strength. Fetch me a leaf, a big one. And so Badang reached into a tree and plucked off a leaf and gave it to the hantu ayah. And what did the hantu ayah do? He vomited onto the leaf. Here, eat this if you want to be strong. And with that, he wriggled away and into the water and was gone. And Badang was left with a leaf full of vomit. Oh, I don't want to eat this. But then he saw something in that green, slimy vomit. Some shiny stones. And he knew what they were because he'd heard the people talking of them. Magic stones, Batu Galika. Maybe this really can make me strong. I'll have to do it. And so he held his nose and he drank lots of water. Oh. Am I strong? I don't feel any different. Oh, what's that? I'm feeling all hot. Oh. I do feel different. How can I test it? How can I know if I'm strong? Oh. And he pushed a tree. Bang! He pushed another one. Bang! He pushed down another one. Bang! He had great strength. And because Badang was a kind young man, he used his strength to help the villagers, to help his master. And soon, people began to talk about Badang. Badang the strong, Badang the mighty. And news of his strength spread all over the island of Sumatra and crossed the water to the island of Singapore. And the Raja of Singapore himself heard about Badang. Ask him to come here, he told his men. I want to see this strong man. And when the Raja of Singapore asked to see him, why, his master had to let him go. And so Badang set off for Singapore. When he arrived in Singapore, he walked down the banks of the Singapore River, and he saw such a sight. There was a huge ship with hundreds of men trying to push it into the water. They pushed and they pushed and they pushed, but no matter how much they pushed, it wouldn't move. Well, as Badang passed by, he just gave it a little pop, and splash, into the water it went. The Raja of Singapore was very pleased with Badang. He invited him to live in the palace. They got on very well. They got on so well that eventually the Raja of Singapore made Badang his war chief. But before that, he called Badang and said, we're going to have a competition. I hear that the Raja of Kalinga in India has a strong man, and I have invited him to send his strong man here with 7 ships filled with treasure. And I've told him, if his strong man can beat you, Badang, I will give him 7 ships filled with treasure. But if you beat his strong man, I will keep his 7 treasure ships. Well, Badang was strong, but he was a bit nervous about this. But the day of the competition came. The strong man from Kalinga in India was huge. His muscles bulged. And Badang was average sized. But they started. And the first part of the competition was chopping trees. And they chopped and they chopped and they chopped, but both chopped as many trees in the same time. They were equal. The next part, they had to pull an elephant. But one was just as good as the other. And the last, final part of the competition took place next to the palace on Bukit Larangan, what is now called Fort Canning Hill. And on that hill, there was a huge stone, a huge rock. And they had to carry it. Well, the strong man from Kalinga went first, and he lifted that rock up, 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 but he could not get it beyond his chest, and he dropped it. And then it was Badang's turn. He lifted that rock up, 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 beyond his head, and he threw it. So far, so far, so far, all the way to the mouth of the Singapore River, and it landed with a huge splash. Well, do you think that story is true? I don't know, but I can tell you this, there was really a person called Badang, who was the war chief of the Raja of Singapore. And there was a stone, a huge stone at the mouth of the Singapore River. And it was covered in writing. Nobody could work out what language the writing was in. So nobody to this day knows what that rock said. But I'd like to think that maybe it was about Badang, Singapore's very own superhero. And so that is the story of Badang. And interestingly, that rock It's called, it was blown up by my ancestors, the British, because it was blocking the river, sadly. But there are some fragments of it. There is a piece about this size that's in the National Museum in Singapore. But I don't know. I think there might be some in India as well, because when they were trying to work out what the writing said, it was sent to the Indian Museum in Calcutta. And just maybe some pieces of that rock are still there. So those are my two stories that come from Singapore. They are shared with Malaysia because Singapore and Malaysia used to be one country. And many of the stories that we have in Singapore are also shared with Malaysia and Indonesia. But these two ones I chose because they are very much about Singapore. Okay, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now because I've got other things to tell you about Singapore. Let's see if I can get it up. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I hope you can see it. You've had your Singapore stories now. So let's see what's next. I wanted to tell you before I go into tell you about Singapore, I should tell you about myself because I don't look like your typical Singaporean, although I am a Singaporean. I wasn't born in Singapore. I was born in the United Kingdom. But I've been living in Singapore. This year, it will be 38 years. So I've lived here much longer than I lived in my birth country, England. And I became a Singapore citizen about 7, 8 years ago. So let me tell you a little bit about Singapore. I'm sure some of you might have seen this picture before. This is our Marina Bay. It's very fancy, but not all Singapore is like that. But it does look very pretty at night. And I wanted to tell you about our flag because, we have this flag. It's red on top, white on the bottom. And it's got a moon and 5 stars. So the moon is very much because Singapore is a young nation. We are not very old. We are younger than India as an independent nation.
We are not being able to see the slides.
Oh dear, what?
In fact, we missed all your personal slides as well.
Oh, okay. So have you got the slides because I sent them to you? Can you show them? Because it's
we can see them now. We can just see them now. We could see them now, right? Okay. So we'll just wait.
So if I let me go back to the beginning. Can you see that?
No, we can't see any slide now. So can we?
Okay, let me go back to. Can you see it now?
No.
So I don't know why. Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Don't know what it did. Let me share again.
Yes.
This is very. It doesn't allow you to share properly. I don't think with the whole thing. Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. That was a bit of a. You should have interrupted me before. So can you see it now? Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see this now. Perfect.
Okay. So anyway, this is the map of where Singapore is. It's a very tiny, tiny, tiny island. Okay. And this is what Singapore looks like. And there's where I live in the middle. And I was describing all my pictures and you didn't see them. Okay, now you can see. You can see my pictures, but it doesn't. Yeah, so that's my family there. Okay, and let's go now to the map. the flag. So this is the Singapore flag. And let me just tell you a little bit, some things about Singapore. Everybody says Singapore is, it's very green. That's one of the things that Singapore is known for. It's very green. And we are lucky because one of our previous founding prime ministers, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, he had this vision of Singapore as a city in a garden. And so he planted so many trees, and he, made sure there's flowers. Even our expressways and our bridges are covered in flowering plants. So although, as you can see from the picture in the middle, Singapore is very built up with lots and lots of tall buildings. And many of our buildings are now over, 40, where people live are over 40 stories high. There is still quite a lot of green, which makes it quite a nice city to live in, because you don't feel it's all concrete. But, how many people live in Singapore? Do you know? Well, it's not very many compared to India. It's only 5.69 million. That's a fairly current number. But we have 3.52 million Singapore citizens, but we've got an awful lot of non-citizens living here, 2.17 million non-citizens who share Singapore with us, and many, many of them are from India. So I'm sure, many of you listening may know people who've come to Singapore to work, because we have many, many Indian nationals here. But of the Singaporeans, we are a very multicultural nation. We're about 76% Chinese, of which my husband is one. 7.5% Indians. And the Indians who have been living in Singapore for many generations are mostly from Tamil Nadu, but we have quite a few Malayalis as well. There's a Gujarati community, a Sindhi community. There are small numbers of other Indian communities, but the main Indian community here are the Tamilians. And we have 15% Malay. Now, they are the sons of the soil, the people who were here first, but actually not that many of them were actually in Singapore at first. A lot of them came down from Malaysia. A lot of them came from different parts of Indonesia. So although it says 15% Malay, actually the Malays are not all from the same place. And then there's the 1.5% other races, of which I am one. But the others also include, we have an Armenian community that has been here for many, many, many years. There is also a small Jewish community that has been here for a long, long, long time, and an Arab community as well. So that's the people of Singapore, and that's one of the things I love about Singapore. There are so many different people of different ethnicities. But you think of Singapore as an island. Actually, it's not. It's 64 islands. There's one big island, but 63 much smaller islands. And some of them actually now have been joined up. So when you go there and count them, it probably won't seem like 64, but they've joined up lots of smaller islands to make bigger islands. And we have a couple of islands that have oil refineries on them. Singapore is a very big oil refinery industry. We have one island that we just put our rubbish in, is a landfill. So the islands have different purposes, but there are still many islands that are just nice to go and and relax on, go swimming on. Singapore is a city-state. It's very much a city. And in fact, it's quite sad. There's only 2 villages left in Singapore. And we call in Singapore, the name for a village is the Malay word kampong. So we said there's only 2 kampongs left in Singapore. One is Kampong Buangkok, which is in the middle of Singapore. And one is Kampong Ubin, which is on Pulau Ubin. Pulau means island, the island of Ubin, which is just off the coast of Singapore, very close to Singapore. But this is how Singapore was back in the 1960s. There were many, many more villages in those days. But then the government started to build these tall flats, and people moved into that, and the villages just went. It's kind of sad, but I guess that's how life goes. And I said to you that Singapore is very green and has many trees at the beginning. And actually, it's quite amazing, but the tiny island of Singapore has more different types of trees than the whole of North America. I checked this up today to make sure it was true. The whole of the USA and Canada together has less types of trees than Singapore. So that says a lot for a tiny island. And the thing that all Singaporeans love more than anything else is food. But what is I particularly love about Singapore food is that it's very multicultural. So we have, you can see here on the left, this beautiful blue bowl. What's in that is a dish called ayam buah keluak. Is actually my favorite, which I put there. And you see on the spoon, there's that black nut. That's a buah keluak. It's a special type of nut. And inside, when you have nuts, usually they're kind of creamy colored, right? But no, this one inside is black. And it's actually poisonous. You have to soak it for 3 days in water, in changes of water. And then you have to cook it thoroughly. But oh, that black nut tastes so good. And that is one of the wonderful dishes that come from the Peranakan cuisine. Now, the Peranakans are a group of people in Singapore and in Malaysia. They are descended from Chinese men who moved to Singapore and married Malay women. So it's both Malay and Chinese combined. And that makes the food really, really interesting. Now, another multicultural dish is the one next to it. That's a fish head curry. And I didn't realize this before I started putting these PowerPoints together, that actually fish head curry was the Malayalis, was a dish from Kerala, but it got changed when it came to Singapore by all the different people from different races. So now it's a very Singapore dish. And then next to it, we have a Malay dish called mee rebus. And it's noodles and eggs and fish cakes and lime in a kind of thick gravy. And it's a typical Malay dish, but it's not Malay really, because they put dark soy sauce in it, which is Chinese. So everything changes when the different races mix together. And the last dish is something I haven't had for a long time, but which is really delicious, is rojak. Now, the rojak in Malay means kind of mixture. And there is a typical rojak, which is like vegetables and fresh fruit and pineapple and mangoes. But this is Indian rojak. So the Indians in Singapore took the idea of the rojak and changed it completely. So that's the wonderful thing. When people from different races get together and share food, you get some wonderful, wonderful new dishes. And talking about food, that's very much on my mind, because we're coming to our Chinese New Year celebrations. In fact, tomorrow we're going to have early my family's reunion dinner. Now, it's supposed to be on the eve of Chinese New Year, which is not until later in the week. But because my daughter has to go to her husband's family on that day, we are having ours tomorrow night. And it's just going to be an extended family and my sister-in-law. But do you see that dish with all the sort of long on the top left-hand side? That's what we call yisang, which is a raw fish salad. And we have this at New Year. It's things like cucumber and carrots and radish, which are very finely grated, you can see. And there's all sorts of other things in it. There is pomelo. I don't know if you have pomelo in India. It's a bit like a sweet grapefruit, but very big and very juicy. And then you have sesame seeds, you have oil, you have plum sauce, you have some sort of green jelly. I don't know quite what that is. And there's these nice crispy crackers. And what you have to do, this is a good luck dish. And it's very uniquely Singaporean, Indonesian, and Malaysian. The Chinese in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia do it. Of course, the Singaporeans say it was invented in Singapore, but the Malaysians and Indonesians say it was invented there. But who knows? And what you have to do is, as you put each of the ingredients, and of course you have raw fish, but actually now we're not using raw fish because there was some problem with the raw fish, and now we're having smoked salmon, or some people put abalone in there. And you have to take your chopsticks. Once you put it in, you toss it up in the air. And as you put all the different ingredients and toss, there are sayings that you have to say. All sorts of funny different sayings, like for good luck. The idea is it brings you luck for the year to come. So that's my extended family. That was taken a couple of years ago on the first night of Chinese New Year, when we gathered at my nephew's place. So that's the whole extended family. And down there are all the goodies. This is the part about Chinese New Year I both love and hate. Love because all the goodies are so good. Hate because I put on weight. And normally at Chinese New Year, what we do is we go visiting. We go to our older relatives' house. The younger relatives have to go to the older house. And we go and visit. And we just chit-chat and we eat some goodies. And we'll stay for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Sometimes you stay for lunch, and then you go on to another relative's house, and then another, and then maybe you go to a friend's house. So in the old days, when we had lots of older relatives, you would eat probably more than you would eat in a week in one day. So it was an endurance test of how many biscuits and things you can eat in each house. And then, of course, you'd have dinner after that. So Chinese New Year is fun, but this year it's very different. We're only allowed to have 8 people in going to any one house. So this year we're going to have a very quiet New Year. It's just going to be the immediate family. So hopefully I won't put on weight this New Year. But I have to confess to you, I've got some jars of those goodies in the kitchen. So I don't know. So India and Singapore. Well, we have so much in common. There are so many Indians who are working in Singapore. I have to tell you that I think I've got more Indian friends than I've got Chinese friends now, because there are so many wonderful Indian people who I've met here, and lots of them are storytellers. But also, down through the ages, India has had a great influence on Singapore and the region. And I think we should celebrate that. In my stories, India didn't really get the best of it. Raja Soran didn't manage to invade China. The Chinese minister tricked him. But I think he got the best of it, because if the legends are true, then his grandson became the founder of Singapore. So that's not, that's quite an achievement if it's true. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me chattering on.
Well, your commitment and passion as a storyteller is commendable, because let me tell you, our audience, that it's past midnight and we still have our teller, Madam SHEILA WEE, bright awake and sharing lovely stories with us as though it's just 7 in the morning. So truly a big salute to you for being with us. And we have our audience drooling, just having a look at those goodies, and the wakala, the fish curry with the head. And I do want to share, we in the eastern part as well have something that's called muri ghanta, which also has the head of the fish curry, vegetables. So a lot of similarities between Singapore and India, but I think more than anything, it's the love that binds us. And a lot of questions coming up. So let me just shoot. So we have Priyanka, we have many more asking us, where exactly do you live in Singapore?
Okay, I live in a place called Bradel, which is if anybody knows, Singapore is right next to Toa Payoh, which is right in the middle of Singapore.
Great. So Anshuman, your question has also been answered. Then we have, let's see what the next question coming up is. The next question is Priyanka, where she asks, what is a language that's spoken primarily in Singapore?
Okay, so our national language is Malay. That is the ceremonial language. But the practical language, the working language, is English. All our schools are totally in English. But because we have 73 or 75% Chinese, a lot of Mandarin is spoken. So if you are going to school in Singapore, all your classes will be in English, but you will do a mother tongue, which would be, if you're Chinese, it would be Mandarin. If you're Malay, it would be Malay. If you are Indian, you probably end up doing Tamil, because that's the main one. But you can do other Indian languages as well, except that not all the schools offer it. So you might have to go by bus to another center. But yes, but basically the good thing and the bad thing is you can get around in Singapore just speaking English, which is good because it's very easy if you know how to speak English, but it's very bad because then you don't bother to learn the other languages. I know a little bit of Malay because my daughters did Malay, because my husband doesn't speak Mandarin, so they did Malay in school. So I know a bit of that. My Mandarin is very little.
There are many who want to know the name of your cat, and they're almost in love with your kitty cat. Yes,
Pickles.
Oh, what a lovely name!
Except I call her Piccalilli.
Oh, piccalilli. Lovely, lovely,
Because
lovely.
piccalilli is a name of an English type of pickle, cauliflower pickle, that has a lot of turmeric in it.
Um, then we have Adya Shri Patnaik asking us, how do you learn stories, or from where do you learn stories?
Um, I most of the stories that I know I get from books, but they're not in the same form as when I tell them. That story I told about Rajasuran, I kind of researched that, and because the Malay annals are in very old-fashioned, it was written in 18 something or other. It was translated, you know, is very old-fashioned, and you have to completely redo it, and you have to reimagine it. So yeah, I get most of mine from books. Sometimes listening to other storytellers. But mostly because I like to read. I would get them from books.
So books are very important, Adya Shri, from where you would get a lot of ideas, stories, and that's how.
Yeah.
Uh, well, there is okay. So Soham, a young little boy, asks us: is Singapore a country or a state?
It's a nation state, so it's both. Yeah, it's both. It's one of the smallest, I think it's one of the three smallest. There's only three nation states. I think it's Singapore, Vatican City, and what's the other one in Europe? What's it called? Is it Monaco? No, I can't remember. Or Liechtenstein, I think. There's very few of them. So it's a very, very, very small country.
Very small country with great tellers like Ma'am. Swati, whose Sanvi's mother wants to know, there is a lot of greenery around in Singapore, and she's been there for 7 years. But she wants to know about the significance of gardens by the bay.
Well, Gardens by the Bay is one of the more recent projects. It is a beautiful, basically it's two domes set in a huge garden, and one dome is a tropical dome where it's actually just like going outside because we're in the tropics, and one is more like a Mediterranean or different climate. So you can have, there's it's got a Mediterranean, or the African, they got baobab trees. And really it was Singapore, because it's so small, because we need to attract people to come. We need the tourism. So we have to make ourselves, create tourist attractions. And that's what the government did. It spent an awful lot of money on creating these wonderful gardens. And they are very nice. It's a very nice place to visit. So it's really just so that people will want to come to Singapore.
Lovely. Well, I want to share with you that Bakul truly believes in planting more trees and gifting plants on occasions. And we want it to be a part of our culture so that we own trees and take care of them just as our family members. So, yes, we echo with your thoughts. Swati again goes and says, I love the place. I just can't go over it and get over it. Yes, yes, yes. Singapore is love. Oh, yes. Thank you, Swati. Okay. Adyasha Dhal asks, can I know your favorite spot?
In Singapore?
Yes.
My favorite spot. Okay. My favorite place. Actually, it's quite close to here, because where I live is very close to a reservoir. It's called Merici Reservoir. And you can, if I walk out of my house, I walk, about a kilometer away. And there's this beautiful reservoir with a boardwalk all around. So you go in, and then all you see is water and trees, and you don't feel that you're in the middle of a city. So yeah, I like places like that where I can escape and feel, be, because I come from the country. In UK, I was brought up in the country, so it's hard for me to live in a city. So I need to find the trees.
So basically, in the laps of nature.
Yeah.
There's a little friend of ours. Her name is Koraki, and she has a request. She says, "Can I please see pickles?"
I don't know if Pickles doesn't like me to pick. I can bring Paddy. I can bring the dog. I can try. Hang on a minute. Paddy.
So as you can all see, that it's almost 12:45 a.m. and by this time we would all be sleepy and snoring. But you can see how dedicated she is with her profession, and I think more than her profession, her passion.
She's not very friendly to me.
So Karaki, your wish has been fulfilled. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, what a lovely click. Click. There it goes. Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you. It is so sweet of you.
This is Paddy.
Oh my God. It's sweet. Oh, he's a sweetheart.
Yes, and he had his bath today.
Thank you
He's
so
nice and clean.
much. Okay. So he's someone who's more friendly, someone more like you, I believe.
Oh dear. Have I loved stories from a young age? Actually, yes. I didn't realize that I was a storyteller until I was in my 40s. But when I was a child, I was the one in the playground that told ghost stories. I was, yeah, and actually, I was very naughty. For a while in my classroom library, I ran a business. I used to read people's palms. They give me sixpence and I make up stories. I think the teacher found out and I got into trouble, but that was, I just made it up. So yeah, I was always making up stories as a child. And
I love this is amazing. I think it's a secret. I think you shared it with us. And in fact, your slides were so lively. You just took us through Singapore, the food, the culture, and more than anything else, a part of you when you shared, your family pics. They were just like, we're meeting them. It was amazing. Absolutely wonderful. So one last question. Saswat asks, do you like horror stories?
Oh no, I am too scared. I like mystery stories, but horror stories I get really scared. Especially, and I don't like horror films either. I think it was my husband's fault because when we were first married, we used to sometimes watch horror films or together, and then he would jump out of the wardrobe at me. Or he would stand outside the darkened window and suddenly a face with it. He loved to frighten me, so I would get very scared. So no, I don't like horror stories.
So there are a lot of questions. Maybe we'll be passing them on to you, and it's very late, and you really need to go to bed. But we're so grateful. We are thankful. We are honored. We are humble, and we enjoyed. There are so many wows in the comment section, and our audience loved the connection that you built with your stories from Singapore to India. And I do want to share with you that Kalinga too is a part of Orissa. Well, it's also a part, I believe, of maybe
Actually,
Bihar, Telangana, the other states. But yes, it's also a part.
I
Um,
thought it might be because I had this. I knew there was something about Orissa, but I couldn't find I couldn't find it in my book, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, fantastic.
so before we end, I want to share with all of you that the moment we announced that we have a story travel to Singapore, Bakul got not only noticed but also tagged by Joint Secretary Ministry of External Affairs, Mr.
Oh wow!
Sandeep uh, Chakrabarti. Yes, and thereafter he put up a quiz question, very interesting. It was all about ungoogled quiz. So it was ungoogleable quiz. So that's how Bakul is doing an amazing job. We have a library full of books, and there is lots that our volunteers do. So kudos to them. And before we say goodbye, let me tell you that tomorrow sharp at 9, we have Robibar Gopabar Stories in Oria by a vibrant storyteller. So do join us tomorrow at 9. We'll be there right waiting for all of you. And can't thank Madam Sheila Wee enough, but have to bid her goodbye. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye bye, everyone.